Right, hello everyone, and welcome to this Installer Festival session. Today we're going to be looking at the Green Home Grant Scheme, which is coming out later this month. I'm joined by Adrian Lightwood from OFTEC. Hi, Adrian.
Hello.
And Phil Mason from TrustMark. Hi, Phil.
Good afternoon.
Adrian, if we can start with you, can you tell us a little bit about your background, please, and your role at OFTEC?
Yeah. My role is to operate the registration schemes of OFTEC. OFTEC are known for various things. A trade body representing the manufacturers, but also we have a registration arm, and that seems to be sort of producing quite a lot of interest from installers. Established for 25 years, I've been there 16 years, and an ex-heating engineer, so fully understand the sort of concerns and challenges heating engineers have, and hence we have a registration scheme, and hopefully it's been quite successful. I'm looking forward to continue that with TrustMark and MCS.
Perfect. And Phil, what's your kind of role and background at TrustMark?
Okay, currently I'm the head of regulatory engagement, which really means that I manage a number of sort of relationships from that with government and Ofgem, the energy suppliers, Energy UK, and the supply chains in relation to our sort of fairly recent role in regulation through ECO and now in the Green Homes Grant Scheme. I've recently moved from being the head of compliance with TrustMark, managing our compliance activities. So I'm doing some of this with a bit of a compliance head on as well. Sort of old habits sort of die hard, don't they? Bit of a similar background to Adrian, really. I served an apprenticeship with the old-fashioned gas board, for anybody that's old enough to be able to remember that. I've been in and around the gas industry and the energy industry since I started work, really. So coming into sort of TrustMark and the energy efficiency world just what seemed a natural progression to me, really.
That sounds really good. And the Green Home Grant Scheme is obviously something that people are paying a lot of attention to in our industry. Heating engineers, oil installers, plumbers, renewables professionals, all very interested. So what are the measures that are included in the Green Home Grant Scheme, and how is TrustMark involved in administering the technical standards?
Okay, right, really fundamental question. Exactly as you're going to be able to tell, I'm about to read from a list, which is a bad habit, but I don't want to miss anything off, because for the simple reason that if you miss something out, then that's a sort of sector. I mean, just a word on a page, but it's an entire a sector in energy efficiency or in sort of low carbon heat that's missed out. So essentially it's split down into two areas. There's primary measures and secondary measures. So if I start to talk a bit about the primary measures, and there's some in there that'll be more of interest to us in the conversation today. So the primary measures, there's insulation measures. So that's solid wall, cavity wall, underfloor insulation, loft, room in roof, flat roof insulation, and park home insulation. So those are the primary insulation measures, but these are the bits that are of interest to us today, I think, really. The primary measures of low carbon heat, which include air and ground source heat pumps, solar thermal and biomass. So there's quite a lot of opportunity there in the heating world in that. So if I move over to secondary measures, windows and doors, which includes draft proofing, double glazing, triple glazing in replacement of single glazing, secondary glazing in connection with single glazing, and energy efficient replacement doors. But the bit again that's more interested are the heating controls and insulation relating to the heating world. So that's hot water tank thermostats, hot water tank insulation, heating controls, which are sort of smart heating controls, zone controls, radiator thermostats, and things like TRVs, things like that. So how does TrustMark fit into all of this? So since I've been at TrustMark, we've been on a sort of continual upward sort of scale up to deliver the Each Home Counts quality mark. Then from the beginning of the year, we were drawn into the eco regulations, and now this has come along. So it's sort of part of that natural progression when you get on a roll. So TrustMark businesses will be able to participate through being TrustMark registered and or MCS registered. So that brings you into a compliance process and a quality process through participating in TrustMark through a scheme provider such as OFTEC. I think it's important at this point to say that all the work that will be completed through the Green Homes Grant Scheme will need to be lodged into the TrustMark data warehouse, which means we'll know who did what, where, at what address, how they did it, how it's financially protected. So linking back to the sort of earlier comment that I made about we've gone on this continual upscale, we've been through the last weeks and months. We've gone through an office. We've had to move office, such as been the upscale, insofar that we need to, and we have expanded our compliance function in our office in Basingstoke, which means bringing in a team of and training a team of desktop auditors to be able to audit the data that comes into the data warehouse to make sure that the documentation is correct and that the lodgement is correct, and those lodgements need to be made before payment is made. So if we find issues with that, any sort of issues around documents missing or not being quite correct, TrustMark will deal directly with the business to say there's a bit more information that we need there, or that isn't quite right. Sort of reevaluate that, then accept the lodgement or not, as the case might be. Then in terms of what our activities out in the field, and this is a little bit of a change through where TrustMark has normally operated, because through scheme providers, the compliance of activities have been carried out. So there's no change in the way that works. So businesses that register with TrustMark will come in, they will need to either be, as I say, MCS registered, or they will need to be PAS 2030 certificated, which is a requirement for public funded schemes. So all those activities through the certification bodies will carry out through in terms of their surveillance. Just going back to our ramp up of compliance activities in the field, we now have a team of directly employed field surveyors that will be able to go to site and monitor the work. A lot of that will be led by a risk-based model that we've created, and probably the outcomes of some of the desktop auditing that the directors where to go, because there's going to be an incredibly large amount of work delivered through this initiative. We're not only then reliant on our scheme providers to carry on their activities as they do at the moment, the certification bodies to do what they already do at the moment in terms of surveillance, but we're also connected to in the energy company obligation. They have in ECO, they have something they call technical monitoring. So there's a whole community of technical monitoring agents out there that already function in ECO. So we are engaged with an element of that technical monitoring community that will work with TrustMark in order to deliver a wider audit of the work activities, so we can capitalize and work with their existing competency and resource to be able to scale up, because everything's moving at such a pace. We really need to scale up quickly to be able to deliver the quality assurance scale at the end of it. So those are the measures, and that in a bit of a whistle-top tour is the TrustMark involvement around monitoring the controlling and monitoring the technical standards.
Yeah, sounds like there's been a lot going on with you guys. So question number 2, what are the fundamental differences between MCS, CPS and TrustMark?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think installers have been phoning us quite a lot recently with the same question. A lot of acronyms there. We'll start with CPS, stands for Competent Person Scheme. And I think that's what installers are currently familiar with, being Gas Safe and OFTEC, to name just 2 of schemes out there. Competent Person Schemes, the main purpose is that the member of that scheme can self-certify their own work to compliance with building regulations, which is a mandatory thing now. If you don't self-certify through a scheme, you have to get building control approval, which does cause a little bit of challenges in the fact that the cost is a lot more prohibitive. It's over £100, where you can self-certify for £2–3 through the likes of a Competent Person Scheme. Building control do like the schemes to take control of the self-certification, and most gas and oil installers do generally use their scheme to self-certify. Tried and trusted, it's been there for a long time. We then have MCS, which is the Micro Generation Certification Scheme. This is specializing in renewable technologies, heat and electricity generated through renewable sources, solar PV, solar thermal, biomass, heat pumps. The purpose of that scheme is that it's more technically based around those technologies rather than CPS. You still have to self-certify renewables, but the MCS scheme has their own technical standards that installers have to comply with. Hence, there's a separate scheme for it. The drivers for MCS are that funding for consumers like RHI, which is the Renewable Heat Incentive, another acronym unfortunately, and the feed-in tariff all went through MCS installers. MCS are now expanding into battery storage. That will dovetail with the solar PV industry. And numbers are growing onto that scheme. It's now broken away from government's control and is now independently run, and it is gaining traction. And how it fits into the Green Homes Grant is that for the low carbon technology heating, Phil mentioned biomass, solar thermal, heat pumps, MCS certification is a requirement, as well as TrustMark. TrustMark's role, it would be fair to say TrustMark, the role in this is that they tend to look after the consumer, focus more on consumer protection.
Perhaps chip in there, Adrian, because there are a lot of schemes out there that create and enforce technical standards, such as Adrian has just spoken about. But one of the outcomes from the Each Home Counts review was there needed to, well, it depends which terminology you use, somebody that's either overarching or underpinning what goes on. We become, because we're approved as the government endorsed quality scheme, we're really the vehicle by which the range of schemes that exist are collectively brought together and sort of funneled back through the government requirements. And I suppose the parts that we bring to it we don't create technical standards, some of the ones that Adrian has just spoken about, but what we do is bring an element of financial protection and an element of consumer protection through I mean, in an ideal world, everybody gets everything right first time, but we know that we don't live in an ideal world, and occasionally things go wrong. So it's about bringing in through TrustMark good dispute processes. If a dispute process was exhausted, then it's about using an alternative dispute resolution process and an ombudsman to be able to bring those things together. So what it really does is it recognizes the existing technical standards, but just brings in stronger elements of consumer protection.
Yeah. And yes, and I think that's quite a crucial thing nowadays. You know, everybody wants to protect the consumers more, yes, there's certain rules that the TrustMark have brought in, which I think are probably valid and needed. You know, like engineers who go into consumers' home having a DBS check. You know, are they doing all that sort of check? It also looks at high pressure selling and pressure selling and proper documents, proper terms and conditions.
Make sure it's done in an ethical way with respect to the consumer's wish and rights.
I think most companies do that, but this just puts a little bit of procedure to it, a little bit of structure to it. So TrustMark registered businesses will probably have that little higher level of consumer protection, which I think government recognises needed when there's so much money being offered for home improvements. I think that covers most of the sort of scheme requirements. But as I say, installers are very welcome to phone our offices or any of the TrustMark scheme providers, and we'll explain exactly what they need to do to register through a scheme provider for the TrustMark scheme.
Or indeed TrustMark. Visit the TrustMark website, and there's contact details on there should anybody wish to talk to us either in person, and we've got a contact centre that can take all the daily questions. But I suppose people that sit in a role like me, and I'm not unique within TrustMark, are there to sort of build relationships with some of the sort of key stakeholders, manage the relationships, and sort of deal with the questions and the issues as they arise.
Yeah, so I mean, we've already touched on this. So you've got the registration with MCS for competency, and you've got the registration for TrustMark, which is, as you just mentioned, more of a consumer best practice protection kind of standard. So, do you see this kind of going forward, this MCS and TrustMark, in future schemes?
I personally do. Yes, I think governments their direction is that they want installers to be competent, obviously, and that's where CPS and MCS come in that there's set standards that the installer uses, and it's a black and white scheme. And I think it dovetails in with the ethics of TrustMark in that, linking to established schemes, but offering that extra bit of consumer protection, which I think has been missing, possibly in the heating and plumbing sector. And I think, yes, I think BEIS's policy and even government as a whole, not just England, but I think Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland should also be looking at this extra layer of consumer protection. So yes, I think the future direction will be TrustMark, MCS, CPS are all required. They all have their areas, and I know installers sometimes question whether all these schemes are required. They do all do different things, and yeah, I think government's direction is definitely endorsing TrustMark for all trades, not just heating, whether it be any sort of home improvement, whether it be inside the house or outside the house. I think the future direction will be to be under this umbrella scheme of TrustMark. Would you agree, Phil?
Yeah, I would. One of the things that I think we've been trying to work to achieve is currently there's a requirement here to be part of the MCS scheme and be part of TrustMark. So that means that an installing business has got 2 schemes to sign up to. So TrustMark and MCS have been working closely over the last year or so to be able to find a route through by which there can be a sort of mutual recognition. So an installer would only have to join one scheme once. And the issues that exist exactly when you think you've got to the point where you've found a solution, there's a conflict of interest identified somewhere, or there's some other problem in the way that can work together. So I don't think we're a million miles away from a solution. It hasn't progressed quite as quickly as we might have both hoped for and as perhaps the industry might have hoped for, but we're working very hard to be able to just bring some mutual recognition so that installers don't need to join 2 schemes. And I think the quicker we can get to that, then the happier everybody probably would be, and the easier it is for people, the more cost effective it becomes as well.
Yeah, I think installers would welcome that. I do hear the frustrations of, all these schemes, all these acronyms, what do they mean? So yes, I would support that, Phil, and yeah.
I hope we can get there shortly.
Yeah.
One to watch out for. So going back to the Green Home Grant Scheme, how, it's a £1 million question, I suppose, but how successful do you guys think it can be?
Right, okay. This is the $1 million question, of course, isn't it? And none of us can see what the future is. Only time will tell. But where we are, I think, at the moment, the government has put so much confidence into our sectors collectively that they're going to put £2 billion into it in 2 different schemes. So there's a massive amount of interest from the trade in terms of finding out what they need to do to register. There's a huge interest from the general public, but the success of the scheme, I think, and I'm sure you'll agree, Adrian, will be down to the simplicity and the quality of the delivery. That the scheme, the industry needs to work together and work really hard to make sure that not only do we deliver within the time scale, let's get the money spent, let's get it spent in a really good quality way that really draws attention to our sector by not only the government, by the public, that confidence is boosted. Because what we've really got to do over the next 30 years or so to get to the government's targets of carbon zero, we've got to retrofit some 24.5 million of our approaching 27 million homes. So this is a really good opportunity to kickstart that process, bring confidence to the sector, as I say, bring the government's attention to what we're doing, so that at the end of the scheme, where I'm pretty comfortable and pretty confident that with working together and with the adequate messaging and the control and the communication through it, that it can be a real success. And at the end of the scheme, the real bonus would be that there is so much confidence that we can move away from a sort of boom and bust type industry that the retrofit industry has been over the years, with various grants coming in and ending and various phases of grants, that there's a consistent sort of approach towards it. The government's confidence there, more money's available, and the industry can become sort of consolidated and sustainable to deliver this for the rest of the future. So I think, Adrian, we had a conversation earlier. I think we're both exceedingly positive about it. Time will tell, but it's all these control mechanisms and the inputs from government, the inputs from TrustMark, the inputs from scheme providers like OFTEC that are really critical to making it successful. The messaging around it and the simplicity and the understanding for installers to be able to engage with it is really critical, because if you haven't got a delivery supply chain behind it, that brings an issue. So I think that all these things can work together and we can really make a success out of it. And it's absolutely in all our interest to do so as well.
I think it will create work, it will create jobs. I think it'll be welcome to a lot of heating companies who may have been facing a tough winter through the recession. I think the Chancellor has specifically said he wants to create jobs, green jobs, and I think this is a signal of how serious they are. So yes, I do think that it will create a lot of interest, and it has created a lot of interest. Yeah, hopefully a lot of heating engineers who may have been facing a bleak winter will have something now to occupy them.
There's an opportunity here.
I think there's going to be quite a lot of heating work undertaken. Biomass, solar thermal, heat pumps, and I think the gas and oil sectors have the skills to transfer into these renewables. So I do encourage people to at least look at it and contact schemes to see what is involved. And yes, very, very hopeful. No one knows exactly how it's going to, as Phil says, the devil's in the detail, and a simple scheme works well. So let's see what happens at the end of September when the scheme goes live. But yes, I'm hopeful it'll keep a lot of heating engineers busy.
Yeah, I mean, we know from when we publish stories about it, there's a lot of interest from installers. You can see why, because for everything you just mentioned, the opportunities that it can provide for businesses. So other than registering for TrustMark and MCS, what do installers need to do to get involved? And is it manageable for like a typical heating business, which is a bit of a like, what is a typical heating business? But yeah, is it manageable for those, sole traders or SMEs that could take advantage of this?
So if we go back to some of the entry requirements of the scheme, TrustMark, MCS if you're doing renewables, and PAS 2030 certification if you're doing energy efficiency measures. Now, there is some work to be done and there is some cost attached to that, but those are processes that will work now. So in the background, I think one of the things that TrustMark's started a process of trying to work through how we might be able to support some of that. This isn't about compromising any standards. There's a bar that's set, but it's about seeing if there's a package, if there's some support that can be delivered to help newer businesses that come in, because we've only got a 6-month delivery, be able to get over those bars and meet those requirements. So there's a bit of support probably could be thought about how that does. And I'm very hopeful that in the not too distant future, we'll know what that looks like and be able to offer something. It's not a guarantee, but there's quite a lot of work and thinking going on how that might work there. But there's a couple of things in here where you've asked a question that I don't think genuinely Adrian or I could answer every single element of it, because we're still awaiting for a scheme administrator to be appointed. So I think BEIS are in those very, very final throes of doing that. There's been an invitation to tender that was issued a very short period back. So it's all quite a quick process because everything's rolling on so quickly. So I think they're now in the final, as I'm aware, they're in the final stages now of appointing the administrator. And we don't know who that's going to be. When the administrator is appointed, we understand that working in conjunction with BEIS, they will need to set up some terms and conditions for a consumer to sign up to and for a business to sign up to. So there's some requirements there. And I'm also aware of the fact that the businesses will need to register with the administrator. So they're on the scheme as well. So the administrator knows who they are for the cross flow of information between the administrator and TrustMark for compliance purposes and for payment purposes. So those are the next steps that need to be gone through. The signing up to terms and the registration with an administrator, the signing up to the terms and conditions so they know what's there to be delivered, all the stuff we've already spoken about, and whether there's anything or not that might come out of the administrator's role that we're not aware of, we're yet to wait and see. But as the next few days and weeks start to progress, we'll have more information about what that might be. But I just do support what we've kind of all probably said earlier, that the steps to getting involved with it need to be as manageable and simple as possible to make people say, oh, I get that, I'd like to do that, and I feel I can engage with it. So there might be just a little bit more to go yet. We don't know what registration with the administrator will look like currently, but hopefully that's going to be a straightforward process, because we don't want too many sort of registration processes to go through. When that's out, we'll know the detail, but those currently look just like the additional steps, other than those that we've already spoken about, that will be required. And I know that Adrian and I are sort of, for a pair of fellas, are sort of waiting for that information now, because a lot of questions that are coming in, and you'll be getting them as well, they can all be answered in full, rather than saying, well, this is what we know at the moment. We can give you the whole installer and the whole consumer journey then.
Yeah, I would encourage installers to at least look at it if they haven't already. I think it's an opportunity to get MCS certified, CPS certified, TrustMark certified. There is some back-end office work required, so an installer has to be prepared for that. But I have seen quite a few small sole traders and small businesses enter MCS. So it is possible, and yeah, I would encourage people. This is a big opportunity to expand their business. It'll lead to other things. It's not. I'm sure it's not short term. There will be other funding schemes available. So it's as good a time as any to start looking at diversifying your business, certainly into heat pumps and those type of technologies, because I think there is going to be a lot of installers required going forward, not just next year, but up until 2020, 2030, to meet government's targets. So there's a lot of opportunity, and I think installers should start now to look at MCS and
if my maths are correct, I think there's an expectation that somewhere in the region of 600,000 homes can be improved through this scheme. So that gives an idea of the size of the opportunity there is in the next 6 months. So if my maths are correct, if I take 24.5 million and take 600,000 off, that leaves us with 23,900,000 homes left to be improved in the next 30 years or so to meet carbon neutral. So there's a fantastic opportunity, and it's over a long period of time as well. So this is the opportunity to kickstart that, start to grow the supply chains that we need to be able to deliver all that work and in a sustainable way. And we've got 30 years to do it in. So there's some real business opportunities, as long as we as an industry can deliver this consistently and with quality and reliably. It's a fabulous opportunity.
Yeah, I agree.
So if we start with Adrian, and then I'll ask Phil the same question, but what as a representative of OFTEC, what would you say to installers? You said, like, definitely look into it, but how can you help, and what would your advice be?
Certainly the website is the first point. Have a look in the websites, read up on TrustMark, also MCS. Give us a call, talk to us. We have advisors. If you're already on a CPS register, it's a great start. It's a great start. Training is required. Seek out training courses. You know, it's always good to go and get your hands on at a training center. Learn a little bit more about the technology. Training is advisable, but it's not mandatory because MCS does have a experienced worker route. So if you've got a good background in heating, and you can produce a CV with showing a good number of years experience, you will be accepted onto the MCS register. Look at the scheme documents, the sort of standards for MCS. Be prepared for a little bit of back office work. Quality management is required, but it's not. It shouldn't be too frightening. And yes, I think now is the time to start looking to the future. Start looking at installing other products. Consumer demand will come. There will be other funding schemes. There will be a replacement for RHI, and I'm sure BEIS will be having other funding schemes soon. So yeah, I suggest installers contact TrustMark, contact their scheme providers, and start learning what is required.
Yeah, and Phil, same question to you.
I'd almost echo that word for
The exact
word.
same thing, yeah, probably.
And I think what's really important here, and OFTEC are a really good example. They're setting themselves up. Well, they have set themselves up over duration, and that hasn't been achieved overnight. You've set yourself up as a one-stop shop, really, haven't you, for MCS, for competent person schemes, for TrustMark, for PAS certification. So I really think it's important that installers talk to their scheme providers that are relevant to their sector. Some businesses, there are lots of businesses that are already registered because they're already delivering within eco, or they're delivering in the able to pay market. So it's look at the websites, it's have the conversations, it's understand what's expected of you. I think the first port of call is your scheme provider of preference. If they can't answer all the questions for you, you can contact us at TrustMark. We've done a lot of stuff on the website. That's pretty dynamic. That changes on a regular basis. The more information that we get out there. And I also think that opportunities like this that you've set up to get a couple of chaps to come in and talk about the organisations and talk about the wider opportunity, I would also encourage installers wherever they can, if there's a webinar available in the industry for 20 minutes, half an hour, try and have a listen. The opportunities there, it's get as much information as you can, and if you've got questions, ask them. Even if you feel a bit concerned about the question that you've got as somebody that wants to participate, there is no such thing as a stupid question. Please ask them. Please find the information out. And you're ever so welcome to ask. We want the inquiries.
No, it sounds like a fantastic opportunity. And yeah, like you said, it's just for engineers to reach out and see how they can get involved.
Correct. Yes. Now is the time. I think it's. I think BEIS has set their stall out. They're committed. They're putting a lot of funding, and they want to create jobs, and not just create jobs, but also retain jobs. We want heating engineers to stay installing heating, and whatever the heating technology is, they have the skills already to install any type of fuel, whether it be biomass, heat pumps even. Yeah, there's plenty of scope there.
No, perfect. Thanks a lot for your time, guys. That was very informative.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invite.